Welcome, my name is Eric Lancheres, and this is the Helpful Content Update 2023 Full Analysis, Theories, Tests, and Recovery. So if you've been affected by the Helpful Content Update, or potentially you have clients that have been affected by the Helpful Content Update, this is for you. We're going to be covering a whole bunch of stuff that will hopefully help you navigate the waters and potentially recover a website that has been affected. Specifically, we're going to be diving into important information. So the release dates, rollout impact, and I'm going to try to explain the algorithm as much as I can. We're going to be talking about all the data that I have collected, statistics, charts, figures. I have a lot of data for a lot of different sources. I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to show you my in-depth analysis of the Helpful Content Update. I'm going to share my ideas. I'm going to share the trends, the observations, and of course, we're going to go into theories of what happened with the Helpful Content Update. I'm going to show you ongoing tests that are currently being performed, and we're going to be talking about recoveries of the Helpful Content Update. So everything that you need if you've been affected or you know people that have been affected. Now, before we begin, big disclaimer, I'm presenting my data, my analysis, tests, and theories. However, until we have a repeatable process to recover websites from the Helpful Content Update, everything is subject to change because, until we have a repeatable process, say, okay, we do this, this happens, everything is up for interpretation. And I revise the right to change my interpretation as we go testing. And if you choose to act on any of the information provided below, you do so at your own risk. I have no control over Google, and I can't predict how Google is going to react to your website or how it's going to react in the future. So you're responsible for any changes you make to your own website. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive into it. Let's talk about the Google Helpful Content Update from Rollout to Impact. So the important dates essentially are going to be September 14th. This was the rollout of the Helpful Content Update, but a lot of people have been impacted on September 18th, and I'm going to talk about that and show that in just a moment. Now, when we're talking about these updates, it's actually important to consider there's 4 updates that have been released almost at the same time or in very short succession. We have the August core update that a lot of people are confusing with the September 14th Helpful Content Update. So these two are often confused online. So it's very important to know, was I affected by the August core update or the Helpful Content Update? And now we have 2 subsequent updates that are rolling out, the October spam update and the October core update, that don't seem to be as impactful, but those are also rolling out. We're yet to see the full impact. I just noticed I have a typo here. All right, cool. So if you were affected by the Helpful Content Update, this is kind of what it looks like. This is an Ahf Traffic Graph, and around September 18th is when most websites saw a dip. So this is one of the websites that was affected by a Helpful Content Update, and this is what it's going to look like on your within your tools or within your traffic drops, your analytics essentially. So if you see that, that's most likely what we're talking about right here. If the increase or drop happened earlier, kind of like in August, then you're probably dealing with the August core update. But more on that in just a sec. So here are some official statements from Google on the August on the Helpful Content Update. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, why are you going to read Google stuff? And I do agree with most of the SEO community that Google's often misleading, right? So Google often will have statements that go out there that don't necessarily point us in the right direction. However, I think it's still foolish to completely ignore what they're saying, because in my experience, and I don't know if this is true for you, most of the time they are still providing information in the right direction. So you want to be aware of it, even though you want to take it with a grain of salt. So I don't think they're outright lying. I just think that they are sometimes misleading. So here's the official statements, and there's a few reasons why I'm presenting these. So 1, they say the system generates a site-wide signal. I don't think this is them misleading anyone. This is just them saying this is a site-wide impact, and we've seen that. The next thing is they're going to say the Helpful Content system aims to reward content where visitors feel like they have a satisfying experience. And this has been a trend for a very long time, where they're talking about user accomplishment and satisfying experience of the users, essentially looking at user metrics. Now, next, they're saying that they're using a classifier process that's automated and using a machine learning model. This is interesting because Google has not declared or mentioned that they're using classifiers using a machine learning model. Essentially, what this means is they're using an AI classifier to go through the content. So they're also saying that the classifier runs continuously, and this means that you could recover potentially at any time. So what this sentence means is you don't necessarily need to wait for the next core update or next helpful content update in order to recover, as long because it's running continuously, as long as Google crawls your pages, recalculates your score, and then at one point you should, just bounce back. Now, sites identified by the system may have signals applied to them over a period of months. So once again, if you're planning on recovering, it might take Google a good amount of time before they run and recover and kind of process your new score. Now, this actually points to the fact that they need to accumulate enough data, or they need to crawl the entire website. More on that in just a bit. So here, Google also presents official questions that you should probably ask yourself if you're creating helpful content. I don't really like these questions. I think Google always puts out a whole bunch of stuff that is vague and not necessarily too helpful. But I do think there might be some clues. So one of the things is say, does the content present itself in a way that you would trust it? Does it have clear sourcing, evidence of expertise involved, background about the author that publishes a site, such as a link, such as through links to an author page or an about page? So this last part, I think they're pretty much just explicitly saying, hey, when you are clicking on the author, does it point to anywhere? Is there a link to get more information on that author, potentially on an author page or an about page? So that's pretty blatant that they're just suggesting that. And sometimes when Google just suggests things that really take no time to do and they don't hurt, I would just try to do it myself, because there's no harm if it took like 5 minutes to do, and there's no harm in doing it, and it could just only help. So is this content reviewed or written or reviewed by an expert that knows the topic well? So I think this is going to be their emphasis on the authorship. Next is going to be, does it clearly demonstrate firsthand expertise or depth of knowledge? This is kind of one of those just general statements. Do you have an existing audience, existing or intended audience for your business that would find the content useful? So this, if they came directly to you. So this I actually think is really interesting, because they're mentioning, do you already have an audience if they came directly to you? I think they're talking about direct visitors here. I really do think they're talking about, do you have people coming to your website outside of Google search? And if so, is that the type of content you're presenting? So I think once we dive into it and some of the examples, this will start to resonate a bit more. Next, they're talking and mentioning, does your content leave readers feeling like they need to search again to have better information from other sources? So this has been there for a very long time. And this is essentially avoiding the bounce back to Google, which is a negative signal. So the idea is, if someone searches for you on Google, they come to your website and then they bounce back to Google or search again for the same thing, and then they go to a different website. This just tells Google that your website did not satisfy the user intent. You didn't accomplish what you're trying to present, right? So this is a very negative signal, and of course you want to avoid that. After that, they're saying, do bylines lead to further information about the author or authors involved, given background information about areas they write? This is funny, because this is exactly the same thing that they say in the other section. So they're saying this twice, right? So they're saying, can you click the byline? Can you click on the author? Does it give it background information about them when you click on that link? So because they're saying it twice, I'm thinking that this is probably important. There wouldn't be any reason for them to re-emphasize the exact same thing. Finally, they say the why of why you're creating content should be to primarily to help people, content that is useful to visitors if they come directly to your site or to your site directly. This is crazy. This is, once again, the second time that they're hinting at direct visitors to your site. And they're saying, if you're doing this, you're aligning with a EEAT, and you should be rewarded and you should do just fine. So I think in two instances, they're hinting at having a clickable author with more information, and two instances they're hinting at having direct visitors to your site. So you can go read it all for yourself. I left the links here, but these are going to be the official statements. And just them in a vacuum, I wouldn't put too much weight on it. But once we start going through the data, once we start going through the trends and the observations and the tests that we're doing, this is all going to actually seem a bit more clear. So now let's talk about the helpful content update. By the way, the acronym is HCU. If ever you see that, it's called helpful content update. And how the classifier, the AI classifier, can impact rankings. So if you're not familiar with how Google rankings work, this is going to be kind of a quick explanation of how it could potentially work. So there's two ways it could go. For one, they're saying they're using AI classifier. Now, the AI classifier could be either used just to sort pages. So just to classify, just to categorize everything. Because there's different types of pages on the internet. There's informational pages, there's contact pages, there's going to be event pages, job postings, you have e-commerce product pages, you have all these types of pages, and they could use an AI classifier to just sort them into articles that are designed, that helpful articles or not helpful articles, like just articles, right? And then they could go on to different subsystems. Or the AI classifier could actually be used to read and understand the text to determine if it's helpful or not. So instead of just classifying things into categories, the AI classifier might be used to understand if there's helpful signals or helpful information on that page. And I actually think that that's what they're using right now. I do think that the AI has evolved to the point where it could go way beyond just saying if it's an e-commerce page or an article page, but it could also understand the content. So this is where we're going to dive into and kind of function under the assumption of. So here's how it would kind of look. The Google bot crawls your website, comes to your page, and then it runs all the information it crawled from your page into the AI classifier, and then you get yourself what I'm going to call a helpful score. So the helpful score, if it's high, your website does fine, and if it's low, then your website struggles or gets penalized. Very, very simple. Now, what I believe is I don't think that the helpful content classifier acts alone. Whenever Google rolls out updates, there's always modifiers. There's other things that factor in to their algorithms. I think it would be really odd if they just had the AI helpful classifier. They took exactly what came out of it and then just applied it to the web. I always think that there's modifiers that happen with the classifier, with their main engine. So we're going to be talking about these other signals that might play into the role, giving you your final helpful score. So large language models are now commonplace. So this is going to be my second assumption. First assumption is I believe that the AI reads and understands text, and that is going to kind of give you your helpful score. The second assumption that I'm making right now is that it's text-based only. So we do know that Google and other companies have multimodal AI models, right? Models that could understand sound, they could see, they could read text, they could do a whole bunch of things. Those are going to be the multimodal. However, these are going to be very resource intensive, and to deploy this and crawl the entire web is probably resource prohibitive. Like they just don't have enough computing power to be able to process all the entire web like this. So as much as I'd like to see that in the future, I think that right now, if Google's using an AI to classify content and to analyze content, it is going to be text only, meaning that the images, if it's a nice image or not a nice image or what's not, might not have an impact on this helpful content update crawling, even though they do mention original images. We're going to go into that a bit later, but I believe that specifically with regards to the AI classifier, it's text only. All right, cool. Next assumption is going to be that the helpful content update AI classifier is limited. And this is going to be maybe controversial, I don't know, but it's an educated guess that if they're developing an AI classifier, they are going to run into limits, because anyone who's been working with AI these days knows that you are severely limited by the quantity of resources we have, and you have a specific amount of input you could get, a specific amount of output, and the more you increase that, the more resources you have to use, and it goes up by a significant amount. So I've looked at Google's AI models. So they have the Palm 2 AI models, their latest model, and they have different variants of it. Now, within the general AI community, most AI models actually have a context window or a token limit of 4,096. And Google actually has their own models that range from 2,048 to 4,096. And this is kind of like it's going to be like how many tokens it could accept. And 3,072 being the middle ground. They actually have a model like this. So I was looking around at all the AI models that they have, and they're all within that range, or most of them are within that range. So my guesstimate is that if they're using an AI model that needs to be highly efficient to be able to crawl millions of pages or process millions of pages, they would need to limit it at the 3,072 size. And if you break that down from tokens to words, that ends up being a raw input of 2,304 words. And if you have the instructions, which is about 300 words, that ends up being a maximum of 2,000 words for the maximum input when crawling the web. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it. If you want, you can see the written report where I break this down even further. But the quick summary of this is that if they are using AI, I believe, and this is, by the way, kind of like an educated guess, that they're using the first 2,000 words of a page in order to assess if the page is helpful or not. So I also want to point out that this is an educated guess, but also that Google's normal algorithm, so Google has an AI classifier, but they also have a normal algorithm that will read the entire page. So I'm not saying that Google only reads the first 2,000 words of every single page. There are multiple mechanisms at work, specifically with regard to the helpful content AI classifier. I believe it's going to be looking at the first 2,000 words to determine if a page is helpful or not. However, when it's calculating entities and reading the rest of the page to index content, I think it could go above that and you could get more. So if you want more in-depth information, you can see the full paper, but that's one of the assumptions that we're functioning under. So next is that the helpful content update is for articles only. So it wouldn't make sense for the AI to try to evaluate a video page or a home page or a category page. It wouldn't make sense for them to be like, is this e-commerce product page helpful? So I believe that the AI classifier was built for and trained on unhelpful WordPress articles as their main target. So this is what we've seen impacted the most. I think that was the main target for the Google Helpful Content Update classifier. So that is it for part 1. Watch part 2. It's going to be right beside or linked below. We're going to be talking about the stats, analysis, and trends. I hope you see it there.